Mrs. Meir, let's go back to another bit of history. The question of Palestinian refugees has always been basic to the Middle East conflict. If you get into negotiations with any of the Arab countries, what, if anything, are you prepared to offer to settle this question?
For refugees, there's no problem of a solution. If you're talking about refugees, they should have been out of the camps 20 years ago. We took out of the camps many refugees in the Gaza Strip since the Six-Day War. But there is room for the refugees in Jordan, and there is no doubt that if they want a peaceful solution, Jordan is the natural place for Palestinians if they want to live there. There are 20 independent Arab countries, but if the Palestinians want to come to more of self-expression, there's no doubt that between Israel and Iraq, there will be one Arab state, that is Jordan, and that part, after we come to a peace agreement with Jordan, what is across the border of Israel, that's an Arab state, that's Jordan. They call it Palestine, Jordan. Jordan, Palestine, doesn't make a bit of difference. Jordan always had almost a majority of former Palestinians.
I presume when you're talking about Jordan now, you're not including what used to be called the West Bank of Jordan.
No, I said definitely that when we come to a peace agreement with Jordan, and there's a line, there's a boundary, there's a border, what is across that border is Jordan, the East Bank, and if there will be anything else from the West Bank, that's Jordan. That's the home for the Palestinians.
Jordan, in fact, has been the quiet border in this war, although Jordanian units were involved up in Syria. How has that fact that you did not go directly to war as you did in '67 changed your relations with Jordan and perhaps the prospects of negotiating a peace with them?
You know that since the Six-Day War, the Jordanian border was open. There were open bridges, people coming and people going, and we didn't want to disrupt it 5 seconds before we absolutely have to. Now, this I know this is an abnormal situation. Here is a state with whom there is no peace. The borders are open, the bridges are open. He sends his tanks into Syria. His tanks joined the fighting. There's no doubt that some of our men were hit by his tanks, and yet we do nothing on the border because until the last moment, unless we have to, we want to make it possible that there's some possibilities for peace.
Isn't it even more peculiar?
Can you build on that now?
Pardon?
Can you build on that now? Is there any, or has there been any contact with the...
Since the war?
Yes.
No.
Is there still trade, or was that disrupted by the war?
No, nothing was disrupted.
So there was still trade with Jordan?
Everything.
So that when Jordanian troops went north, a lot of them were in trucks rolling on Israeli-made tires?
Maybe.
All right, now you mentioned...
I don't know.
You mentioned...
Not the tanks, really.
Not the tanks, but the trucks. You mentioned before the question of suffering this attack. The Institute for Strategic Studies in London estimates that you have suffered about 5,000 casualties. Is that way off the beam, dead and wounded?
I think that's off the beam, but we suffered a lot.
You suffered less than that?
Less than that, but we suffered a lot.
Can you afford any more? How many more such victories can this country afford with its small population?
Can we afford to live?
I guess.
Well,
Mrs. Meir, before the war, the Israeli policy seemed to be that the Arabs would not come to the negotiating table until they had literally nothing else to do, until they came out of desperation. Now one of the combatants has had some success, some small success. He has troops on your side of the Suez Canal, and there are perhaps prospects for negotiations. Does this indicate perhaps that the original theory was not correct?
We are convinced that we will remain in this area, and Egypt will remain in this area, and all the other our neighbors. We are always looking forward to a possibility, to a hope, that we will live together and we will cooperate. And there'll be real decent human relationship between our countries. Now, with that in mind, we don't want to make him feel that he is frustrated, that he's been humiliated. We've never acted like that towards them. And so he didn't have to go to war to prove that. His great victory in war is not so great. He did something on our side of the canal. We're on the other side. We've never been on the other side.
Let me ask you about that, because I think that's very important in the time we have left. One of Israel's arguments has always been it must have secure and defensible borders. Where your ceasefire is now is hardly something that could be described as secure and defensible. It's a crazy quilted zigzag.
Yes, of course.
Isn't that a big incentive to negotiation?
So we're prepared to negotiate. I mean, who needs the incentive? I want to tell you something. Sadat must, I think, must be given time to enjoy his defeat. And not to immediately, by political manipulations, turn that into a victory. Not because I want him defeated or humiliated, but for God's sakes, he starts a war. Our people are killed. His and the many thousands are killed. And he has been defeated. And then, by political arrangements, he's handed a victory. And has become, or he thinks, has become a hero in the eyes of the Egyptian people. Does that help him?
Are you afraid that's going to happen?
I hope not. But a few things have happened the last few days that make me worry.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Mayer, for being with us today on Face the Nation.
Hold on. In my position feels in days and nights,
yes.
Not only because of the war, but at this very point where I stopped. When Nasser was defeated in 1967, everybody said, but look what you did. He's frustrated, poor man. And now Sadat, he must not be humiliated.
That's what you're talking about. Yeah. This sentiment again starting.
The
Is that what you mean?
Same thing all over again.
You lose if you win if you lose. You mean.
Well, that yes. We can do with that.
Well, what are we supposed to do? Look, when we'll...